The massive chamber stretched beyond what human eyes could comprehend. Ambassador David Cross stood at the center of a crystalline platform that floated in empty space, surrounded by a dome of transparent material that reached into the darkness above. Around him, in perfectly arranged tiers that spiraled upward like an inverted tornado, sat the representatives of the Galactic Council. 3,000 species. 500 billion worlds, the governing body that had ruled the galaxy for over 10,000 years, and they were all staring at him. The Hegemony Prime, a towering creature with 6 arms and compound eyes that reflected the chamber's blue light, leaned forward from his throne of living metal. When he spoke, his voice boomed through translation devices that made every word sound like thunder. Human representative, you stand before the Supreme Council of Galactic Governance. Your species has been summoned to account for violations of the preservation protocols established in Galactic Standard Year 4147. David kept his expression calm, though his heart hammered against his ribs. The briefing materials had prepared him for this moment, but nothing could have readied him for the sheer scale of power represented in this chamber. Each species controlled dozens, sometimes hundreds of star systems. Some had been spacefaring for millennia before humans learned to make fire. Honored Council, David replied, his voice steady despite the circumstances. I am here to represent Earth and all human colonies in this matter. A ripple of what might have been amusement passed through the assembled representatives. The Nexari delegate, her blue-scaled head adorned with glowing neural crowns, gestured dismissively with one of her 4 arms. Human, your species has existed in space for barely 2 centuries. You control 17 worlds in a remote spiral arm that most civilizations consider uninhabitable. What possible threat could you pose to galactic stability? David nodded respectfully. That is precisely what I am here to discuss, Counselor Vexari. But first, I believe there has been a fundamental misunderstanding about the nature of humanity's presence in this galaxy. The Hegemony Prime's mandibles clicked with impatience. Speak plainly, creature. The Council's time is valuable. Of course. David reached into his diplomatic pouch and withdrew a small metallic device. Several security drones immediately moved closer, their weapon systems charging with an ominous hum. This is a standard human communication device, David explained, holding it up for all to see. Nothing more threatening than your own translation matrices. May I demonstrate its function? The Prime gestured curtly, and the security drones backed away slightly. David activated the device. Immediately, the chamber's lighting shifted from blue to a warm amber, and holographic displays materialized throughout the space. The assembled representatives murmured in confusion as star charts appeared before each delegation, showing detailed maps of their home systems. These maps, David continued conversationally, represent current fleet positions, defensive installations, and population centers for every civilization present in this chamber. The data was compiled over the past 18 months using reconnaissance methods that your security forces were unable to detect. The murmuring stopped. The chamber fell into a silence so complete that David could hear his own breathing echoing off the distant walls. Counselor Vexari was the first to find her voice. Impossible. Our sensor networks would have detected any survey vessels in our territory. They did detect survey vessels, David agreed. Hundreds of them, belonging to various council species conducting routine intelligence gathering. What they did not detect were the human observers who have been monitoring your activities from locations your sensors cannot reach. He gestured to the holographic displays, which began showing real-time footage from various worlds. Ships moving through space, cities bustling with activity, military exercises being conducted in supposedly secret locations. For example, David pointed to one display showing a hegemony military base. Fleet Admiral Korth is currently reviewing invasion plans for the Tau sector from his command bunker on Hegemony Prime. The invasion is scheduled to begin in 4 standard days. The Hegemony Prime rose from his throne, his massive form casting shadows across the platform. How could you possibly know that? Those plans are classified at the highest levels. David's expression remained perfectly neutral. Because, Prime Minister, there is a human observer currently standing in your command bunker, invisible to your sensors and recording every word of your planning sessions. The chamber erupted into chaos. Representatives leaped from their seats. Security forces mobilized throughout the tiers, and dozens of different languages created a cacophony of panic and rage. Through it all, David stood calmly in the center of the platform waiting for the storm to pass. It took nearly 10 minutes for order to be restored. When the noise finally died down, the Hegemony Prime's voice carried a new edge of uncertainty. Even if your claims are true, human, what do you hope to accomplish? The combined fleets of the Council represent more military might than your species could withstand. That brings me to the second demonstration, David said, producing another device from his pouch. This one was smaller, resembling nothing more than a simple button. This device is connected to a network of communication relays positioned throughout Council space. When activated, it will send a single signal to human vessels that have been maintaining stealth positions near critical infrastructure throughout your territories. The security drones moved closer again, but David made no threatening moves. Instead, he simply held the device where everyone could see it. Those vessels are not armed with conventional weapons. Instead, they carry something far more dangerous to civilizations dependent on advanced technology. Targeted electromagnetic pulse generators capable of disabling every electronic system within a range of several light years. Counselor. Bexari's neural crowns flickered rapidly, a sign of extreme agitation among her species. You're threatening to destroy our civilizations. Not destroy, David corrected gently. Disable. Your ships would lose power, your cities would go dark, your communication networks would fail, but no lives would be lost. Your people would simply find themselves living as humans did for most of our history, without the technology that makes interstellar civilization possible. The implications hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Every Council species had evolved beyond the point where they could survive without their technological support systems. Losing their advanced infrastructure would mean regression to pre-spaceflight societies, effectively removing them from galactic politics for centuries. What do you want? The Hegemony Prime's voice was barely above a whisper. David smiled for the first time since entering the chamber. Simply to clarify humanity's position in galactic affairs. You see, for the past 5 years, while you have been dismissing us as a primitive species unworthy of serious consideration, we have been studying you, learning your weaknesses, positioning ourselves strategically throughout your territories. He gestured to the holographic displays, which now showed the locations of human vessels throughout Council space. There were thousands of them, far more than any intelligence estimate had suggested humanity possessed. The truth is, honored Council, that humanity has never been seeking conquest or domination. We have been seeking security, the security that comes from ensuring that no civilization can threaten human worlds without facing consequences that extend far beyond what they are prepared to accept. David looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of representatives from across the galaxy. The age of casual galactic warfare is over. From this day forward, any civilization that attacks civilian populations will discover that humanity has very long memories and an infinite capacity for patience. We do not seek revenge, we seek justice, and we have positioned ourselves to ensure that justice will always be served. The small device in his hand suddenly seemed to weigh as much as a neutron star. Now, shall we discuss the preservation protocols you mentioned? The emergency session had been called within minutes of Ambassador Cross's revelation. But Fleet Admiral Dex of the Hegemony Warfleet was already discovering that minutes might as well have been years when dealing with human planning. Standing on the bridge of his flagship, the massive dreadnought Eternal Dominion, Dex stared at sensor readings that made no sense. According to his instruments, space around his vessel was completely empty. According to the reports flooding in from across his fleet, that emptiness was a lie. Admiral, his communications officer called out, her voice tight with barely controlled panic. We're receiving a transmission on all frequencies. Origin point unknown. The main view screen flickered to life, revealing a human male in his 30s wearing a simple gray uniform. His name tag read, Blake Thompson, Captain, Earth Defense Corps. He sat at what appeared to be a ship's command station, though the background was deliberately obscured. Fleet Admiral Dex, Captain Thompson said, his tone conversational despite the circumstances. My name is Blake Thompson. For the past 8 months, I have been the commanding officer of the stealth vessel Silent Justice, currently positioned 42 meters directly above your ship's primary reactor core. Dex's forearms gestured frantically at his sensor operators. They responded with helpless shrugs, Their displays showed nothing but empty space in all directions. Impossible. Dex growled into his communication system. Our sensors are the most advanced in the galaxy. Nothing could approach undetected. Thompson's expression didn't change. Your sensors are designed to detect conventional energy signatures and mass displacements. They were never intended to locate vessels using quantum phase shift technology, a rather elegant solution we developed after studying Nexari temporal mechanics and Vorthon dimensional theory. The Admiral felt his primary heart skip a beat. The humans had not only learned alien technologies, they had combined them in ways the original creators never imagined. What do you want, human? To deliver a message from Admiral Patricia Wells of the Terran Defense Command. But first, let me introduce you to some of my colleagues. The view screen split into multiple sections, each showing a different human captain. Their name tags identified them as commanders of vessels with names like Retribution's Edge, Justice Bringer, and Consequence Bearer. Captain Lisa Grant of the Retribution's Edge is currently positioned alongside your carrier Void Striker. Captain Michael Ross of the Justice Bringer is keeping pace with your heavy cruiser Starbreaker. In fact, every vessel in your fleet currently has a human shadow maintaining close formation. Dex's secondary heart began racing as he realized the implications. If the humans could position vessels throughout his fleet undetected, then every tactical advantage the hegemony possessed was meaningless. But Admiral, Thompson continued, we're not here to threaten you. We're here to prevent a tragedy that your government seems determined to cause. The view screen changed to show a recording of the Hegemony Council chambers. Dex recognized the location immediately. It was the secure planning room where military operations were designed in absolute secrecy. This recording was made 6 hours ago, Thompson explained as the footage began to play. Please pay close attention to the section where your high command discusses the final solution to what they term the human problem. Dex watched in growing horror as the recording showed hegemony leaders calmly discussing the complete extermination of human colonies. The language they used was clinical, reducing human lives to numbers on a tactical display. Operation Clean Sweep, the recorded voice of Supreme Chancellor Vorth explained to the assembled military leaders, will begin with simultaneous strikes on all 17 human worlds. No survivors are to be permitted. The galaxy must understand that challenging the established order has consequences. The recording ended, leaving Dex's bridge in stunned silence. The Admiral had not been privy to the highest levels of strategic planning, but hearing his own government discuss genocide with such casual efficiency made his species' natural predator instincts scream warnings. Admiral, Thompson's voice cut through the silence. Your people are planning to murder 4 million civilians, including nearly 500,000 children. Do you understand why this cannot be allowed to happen? Dex found his voice after several attempts. Human, even if your recording is accurate, the hegemony's decision-making process is not something a single fleet commander can influence. Actually, Admiral, it is. Thompson's calm demeanor never wavered. Because you're going to help us prevent this genocide from taking place. The view screen shifted to show a tactical display of local space. Hundreds of red indicators appeared, showing the positions of hegemony vessels throughout the sector. Every one of those ships currently has a human vessel in close proximity. We have been tracking your fleet movements for months, positioning ourselves to neutralize your offensive capabilities without destroying your vessels or harming your crews. Dex stared at the display in disbelief. The tactical implications were staggering. If humanity possessed the ability to shadow entire fleets undetected, then conventional military doctrine was obsolete. What are you proposing? He asked quietly. Simple. You will order your fleet to return to base and report that you encountered unexpected technical difficulties during routine maneuvers. Your government will postpone Operation Clean Sweep while they investigate what they believe to be systematic equipment failures. And if I refuse? Thompson's expression grew cold. Then every hegemony vessel in this sector will experience actual technical failures. Not enough to harm your crews, but sufficient to leave you drifting in space until rescue vessels arrive, which given the current political climate might take several weeks. The Admiral understood the implicit threat. Several weeks drifting in space would give the humans time to position themselves for whatever response they were planning. It would also demonstrate to the entire galaxy that hegemony military might was vulnerable to human intervention. You're asking me to commit treason against my own government. We're asking you to prevent the mass murder of innocent civilians, Thompson corrected. The choice is yours, Admiral. But understand that this is the only opportunity your people will have to step back from the path they've chosen. Dex closed his eyes, feeling the weight of command settle on his shoulders like crushing gravity. His species had built their civilization on the principle that might made right, that superior technology gave them the authority to treat other species as expendable resources. The humans were showing him a different way, a path where actions had consequences and moral choices mattered, more than technological superiority. What guarantee do I have that cooperating will save my people from retaliation? You have my word, Thompson replied simply, and the word of Admiral Wells, who wishes to address you directly. The view screen changed again, showing an older human woman with silver hair and eyes that seemed to hold the weight of centuries. When she spoke, her voice carried absolute authority. Admiral Dex, I am Patricia Wells, commanding officer of the Terran Defense Command. For the past 2 years, my people have been preparing for the war that your government seems determined to start. We have positioned vessels throughout hegemony space, mapped your defensive installations, and developed countermeasures for every weapon system in your arsenal. Admiral Wells paused, allowing the implications to sink in. But Admiral, we don't want war. We want peace. The kind of peace that comes when civilizations understand that aggression against innocence will always have consequences. Your cooperation in preventing this genocide will be remembered. Your government's plans, however, will not be forgotten. The transmission ended, leaving Dex alone with his thoughts and the weight of an impossible decision. Around him, his bridge crew waited for orders that would determine the fate of their civilization. Outside the viewports, space looked empty and peaceful. But Dex now knew that appearance was deceptive. Hidden in the quantum foam between dimensions, human vessels waited with the patience of predators and the moral certainty of judges. For the first time in his military career, Admiral Dex understood what it felt like to be prey. Communications, he said quietly. Open a channel to all ships in the fleet. His communications officer's hands trembled as she activated the fleet-wide network. All vessels, Dex announced, his voice carrying across space to hundreds of ships. This is Admiral Dex. We are experiencing unexpected technical difficulties and are aborting current operations. All ships will return to base immediately for full diagnostic evaluation. As acknowledgments poured in from across the fleet, Dex realized he had just chosen humanity over his own species. The terrifying thing was that it felt like the right choice. Supreme Chancellor Vorth had ruled the hegemony for 37 standard years, building his power on the simple principle that superior force could overcome any obstacle. That principle was being tested in ways he had never imagined as he stood in the emergency command center, watching his military might crumble before an enemy he could not even see. Report, he commanded, his 6 arms gesturing impatiently at the tactical officers scrambling around holographic displays. Defense Minister Keck stepped forward, his compound eyes dimmed with exhaustion. Chancellor, the situation continues to deteriorate. Admiral Dex's fleet reported technical failures and returned to base 6 hours ago. Since then, we have lost contact with 17 additional battle groups across 4 sectors. Lost contact? Vorf's mandibles clicked rapidly. Explain. Their communication systems have gone silent. Long-range sensors show the vessels are still intact and maintaining formation, but they are not responding to any attempts at communication. It's as if every ship in those fleets simultaneously lost their ability to transmit or receive messages. Vorth moved to the central display, which showed a map of hegemony space. Red indicators marked the locations of unresponsive fleets, creating a pattern that made his primary heart race with fear. This is coordinated. Someone is systematically neutralizing our ability to wage war. The humans, whispered Intelligence Director Thax from his position near the data terminals. It has to be the humans. Impossible, Vorth snarled. They control 17 primitive colonies with a total population of 4 million. Even if they had advanced technology, they lack the numbers to coordinate operations on this scale. As if summoned by his words, every screen in the command center flickered and displayed the same image. A human woman in her 50s wearing the simple gray uniform that seemed to be standard among their species. Her name tag identified her as Admiral Patricia Wells. Supreme Chancellor Vorth, Admiral Wells said, her voice carrying through the chamber's communication systems. I am Admiral Wells of the Terran Defense Command. We have not been properly introduced. Vorth's 4 primary arms reached for his command console, but the screens remained locked on the human's image. Whatever technology they were using had completely overridden hegemony security systems. Human, your interference with hegemony military operations constitutes an act of war. Withdraw your forces immediately or face the consequences. Admiral Wells smiled, and Vorth felt his secondary hearts skip a beat. There was something profoundly unsettling about that expression, not cruel or angry, but filled with the quiet confidence of someone holding absolute power. Chancellor, I think there has been a misunderstanding about the current balance of power in this region of space. Allow me to clarify our position. The displays changed to show real-time footage from inside various hegemony vessels. Ship commanders and crew members went about their duties, completely unaware that they were being observed. For the past 18 months, human reconnaissance teams have been aboard every major vessel in your fleet. Your people cannot see them, cannot detect them, and cannot stop them. They have been documenting everything. Tactical plans, weapon capabilities, crew rotations, even personal conversations among your officers. Vorth stared at the footage in growing horror. The humans were showing him feed from the bridge of his own personal command ship, where Fleet Admiral Zex was reviewing invasion plans that were supposed to be classified beyond top secret. This is impossible. Our security protocols are the most advanced in the galaxy. Your security protocols were designed to stop conventional infiltration methods, Admiral Wells replied patiently. They were never intended to detect individuals using quantum phase shift technology, combined with psychic dampening fields borrowed from Nixari research. The displays shifted again, this time showing schematic diagrams of hegemony ships with detailed annotations about structural weaknesses, critical systems, and optimal target points. The level of detail was staggering. The humans knew more about hegemony military technology than most hegemony engineers. Chancellor, Admiral Wells continued, your government has been planning what you call Operation Clean Sweep, the systematic extermination of human civilian populations. 4 million people, including nearly 500,000 children, marked for death because you view our diplomatic approach to galactic politics as a threat to established order. Those colonists are trespassers on worlds that belong to established civilizations, Vorth replied, though his voice lacked its usual conviction. The preservation protocols clearly state that primitive species must remain in their designated territories. The preservation protocols, Admiral Wells said softly, were written by civilizations that assumed they would always hold technological superiority. They never considered what would happen when a primitive species developed capabilities beyond their ability to detect or counter. The displays changed once more. Showing a star map of the local galactic region, red indicators appeared at hundreds of locations, hegemony worlds, military bases, industrial centers, and government facilities. Every red indicator represents a human vessel currently maintaining stealth position within striking distance of critical hegemony infrastructure. These ships have been in place for months, some for over a year. They carry weapons specifically designed to disable your technology without harming your populations. Vorth felt his legs weaken as the full scope of what the humans were showing him became clear. They had not just infiltrated hegemony space. They had surrounded it, positioned themselves to cripple his entire civilization if they chose to act. What do you want? He whispered. Justice, Chancellor. The kind of justice that comes when those who plan to murder innocents face consequences for their actions. The main display zoomed in on the hegemony capital world, showing the government complex where Vorth currently stood. A single red indicator pulsed directly overhead. The vessel above your facility is commanded by Captain Robert Kim. His ship carries a device that can selectively disable electronic systems within a range of several thousand kilometers. One activation would shut down every computer, communication system, and life support unit in your capital city. Vorth's remaining hearts began racing as he realized the implications. His entire government relied on electronic systems to function. Without them, the hegemony's central authority would collapse within hours. You're threatening to destroy our civilization. Not destroy, Admiral Wells corrected gently. Transform. You see, Chancellor, the age of casual genocide is over. From this day forward, any civilization that plans to murder civilians will discover that their actions have consequences that extend far beyond what they are prepared to accept. The displays showed footage from human colonies, families going about their daily lives, children playing in parks, farmers tending crops that would feed millions. The contrast with the sterile military planning chambers of the hegemony was stark and deliberate. These are the people you plan to kill, Chancellor. Mothers and fathers, teachers and doctors, children who dream of exploring the stars and making friends with alien species. They represent everything that is good about sentient life in this galaxy. Admiral Wells leaned forward slightly, and Vorth saw something burning behind those calm blue eyes that made his species' ancient survival instincts scream warnings. And they are under our protection. Absolute protection. Anyone who threatens them will face justice. What kind of justice? Vorth asked, though he was not sure he wanted to know the answer. The kind that ensures you truly understand the weight of your actions. We have developed a process called temporal justice, a way to make those who plan atrocities experience every moment of fear and suffering they intended to cause their victims. The display showed what appeared to be a courtroom where alien figures sat in defendant boxes while human judges presided over proceedings. The trials were conducted with meticulous attention to legal procedure, but the evidence being presented was overwhelming. Every hegemony official involved in planning Operation Clean Sweep will face trial for attempted genocide. Those found guilty will experience temporal justice, living through the terror and pain they plan to inflict on others, compressed into a subjective period of years while only hours pass in real time. Vorth felt something inside his chest that he had never experienced before. Genuine fear mixed with something that might have been shame. The humans were not offering the quick death of conquest or the dominance of superior force. They were offering judgment. Chancellor, Admiral Wells said quietly, your civilization stands at a crossroads. You can choose to abandon your plans for genocide and work toward a galaxy where all species are treated with dignity and respect. Or you can continue on your current path and discover that humanity has very long memories and an infinite capacity for patience. The transmission began to fade, but Admiral Wells's final words echoed through the command center with the weight of absolute certainty. The choice is yours, Chancellor, but choose quickly. Justice delayed is justice denied, and we have been patient long enough. As the screens returned to normal, Vorth found himself staring at tactical displays that showed a hegemony military that was completely compromised. Every ship, every base, every strategic asset was under human. The trial chamber aboard the human space station New Geneva was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Where most civilizations conducted justice behind closed doors, humanity had chosen transparency, broadcasting every proceeding to any species that wished to observe. Judge Amanda Foster sat behind the curved bench, her graying hair pulled back in a simple style that somehow carried more authority than the elaborate ceremonial garments worn by judges throughout the galaxy. Before her, in the defendant's box, sat Supreme Chancellor Vorth of the hegemony. The most powerful military leader in known space now looked small and defeated, his 6 arms restrained not by physical bonds but by the weight of evidence that made resistance impossible. Chancellor Vorth. Judge Foster's voice carried clearly through the chamber's translation matrix. You stand accused of conspiracy to commit genocide, crimes against sentience, and violations of fundamental moral law. How do you plead? Throughout the gallery, representatives from dozens of species watched in fascination. The Nexari delegation whispered among themselves, their neural crowns flickering with agitation. The coalition observers sat in stunned silence, realizing that their own intelligence sharing with the hegemony might soon face similar scrutiny. Vorth raised his compound eyes to meet the judge's gaze. Your Honor, I plead guilty to all charges. A murmur ran through the chamber. In the months since human trials had begun, not a single defendant had entered a plea of innocence. The evidence the humans presented was so overwhelming, so meticulously documented, that denial was impossible. Chancellor, Judge Foster continued, before sentences passed, the court will review the evidence against you. Please direct your attention to the main display. The chamber's holographic projectors activated, showing recordings from hegemony planning sessions. Vorth watched himself calmly discussing the extermination of human colonies with the same tone he might use to plan a routine supply. Operation Clean Sweep. His recorded voice explained to assembled military leaders, will target all 17 human settlements simultaneously. No survivors are to be permitted. The galaxy must understand that challenging established order has consequences. The recording continued, showing detailed discussions about optimal attack patterns, casualty estimates, and disposal of evidence. The clinical precision with which genocide was planned made even hardened military observers in the gallery shift uncomfortably in their seats. "The evidence shows," Judge Foster said quietly, "that you personally approved plans to murder 4 million civilians, including 487,000 children. Do you wish to make a statement before sentence is passed?" Forth struggled to his feet, his massive frame seeming smaller somehow in the sterile courtroom environment. When he spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. "Your Honor, for 37 years I ruled through fear and force. I believed that superior technology gave us the right to treat other species as expendable resources. I never considered that those resources were individuals with hopes, dreams, and families who loved them." He paused, his mandibles clicking softly. "The humans have shown me that true strength lies not in the ability to destroy, but in the wisdom to show mercy even to those who showed none." Judge Foster nodded slowly. "Chancellor Vorth, you are hereby sentenced to temporal justice. You will experience every moment of fear and suffering you planned to inflict on your victims, compressed into a subjective period of 200 years, while maintaining full awareness of the experience." As security officers led Vorth away, Ambassador Cross stood from his position in the observation gallery. The same human who had first addressed the Galactic Council now served as humanity's representative to the new order emerging across the galaxy. "Honored observers," he announced, "the trial of Chancellor Vorth concludes the prosecution of all hegemony leadership involved in planning genocide against human civilians. However, our investigation has revealed evidence of similar crimes planned by other civilizations." The gallery erupted into concerned whispers. Representatives from various species suddenly found urgent reasons to examine their communication devices or consult with their aides. "Tomorrow," Cross continued, "trials will begin for coalition officials who provided intelligence used in targeting human civilian centers. The evidence suggests that 12 coalition intelligence officers knowingly supplied information that would have resulted in the deaths of innocent families." Coalition Ambassador Thiss rose from her seat, her bioluminescent patches flickering rapidly with agitation. "Ambassador Cross, the coalition maintained strict neutrality in all conflicts. Any intelligence sharing was purely routine diplomatic cooperation." "Ambassador," Cross replied calmly, "we have recordings of Coalition Planning Committee meetings where your intelligence chief specifically discussed providing targeting data for pest control operations." The committee members laughed when told that pest control referred to the extermination of human children. The accusation hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Thais felt her primary hearts race as she realized the humans had somehow obtained records of conversations that took place in the Coalition's most secure facilities. "How could you possibly have such recordings?" she whispered. "The same way we obtained recordings from every other government that participated in planning genocide against human civilians," Cross answered. "For the past 3 years, while you have been dismissing us as a primitive species, we have been documenting every crime planned against our people." Judge Foster called the next case. "The court will now hear preliminary evidence in the matter of coalition intelligence officers who provided material support for planned genocide." The holographic displays activated again, showing footage from inside coalition government buildings. High-ranking officials discussed humanity with casual contempt, referring to human children as breeding stock and human colonies as target practice for hegemony. Forces, Coalition Intelligence Chief Rax, the recording showed a reptilian figure explaining to his staff, has confirmed that human agricultural centers are defenseless. Our targeting data will ensure maximum casualty rates among civilian populations. Ambassador Thiss felt her legs give way as the recording continued. The humans had not only documented coalition involvement in planning genocide, they had recorded private conversations that revealed the depths of her government's moral corruption. Ambassador Thiss, Judge Foster said gently, "Your government will have the opportunity to provide legal representation for the accused officials. However, we strongly recommend that coalition leadership consider broader reforms to prevent future involvement in atrocities." The judge turned to address the entire gallery. "This court wants to make something clear to all observing civilizations. Humanity does not seek conquest or domination. We seek justice. The kind of justice that ensures those who plan to harm innocents face consequences, that matched the magnitude of their intended crimes. Behind Judge Foster, a new display activated showing images of human families, parents reading to children, teachers instructing students, farmers growing food that would feed millions. The contrast with the sterile planning session shown earlier was stark and deliberate. These are the people various governments plan to murder, the judge continued. Mothers and fathers, teachers and doctors, children who dream of exploring the stars and making friends with alien species. They represent everything that is good about sentient life in this galaxy. She paused, allowing her gaze to sweep across the assembled representatives. And they are under our protection. Absolute protection. The age of casual genocide is over. From this day forward, any civilization that plans to murder civilians will face judgment in this court. Ambassador Cross stepped forward again. However, we also want to emphasize that humanity believes in redemption. Civilizations that abandon their aggressive policies and work toward genuine reform will find us to be valuable allies. The galaxy is large enough for all species to prosper if we choose cooperation over conquest. He gestured to the displays, which now showed human colonies working alongside alien settlements, sharing technology and resources for mutual benefit. This is the future we offer. A galaxy where justice protects the innocent, where moral law supersedes military might, and where every species can contribute to something greater than any of us could achieve alone. In the gallery, representatives from across the galaxy sat in stunned silence. They had come expecting to observe the trial of a defeated enemy. Instead, they had witnessed the birth of a new galactic order, one where actions had consequences and justice was not merely a concept, but an absolute force. As the court session ended, many of them were already composing urgent messages to their home governments. The content would be similar across all species. The humans had changed everything, and the old ways of doing business were forever gone. The galaxy would adapt to human justice, or it would face the consequences of refusing to change. Either way, there was no going back to the way things had been before humanity decided that enough was enough. 2 years after the first trials began, the galaxy barely resembled its former self. Admiral Patricia Wells stood on the observation deck of New Geneva Station, watching ships from dozens of species dock at the facility that had become the center of interstellar justice. Where once the great powers had carved up space between themselves through conquest and intimidation, now they sent representatives to learn about concepts like accountability, due process, and the rule of law. "Admiral," came a voice behind her. She turned to see Captain Blake Thompson approaching, his expression thoughtful as he carried a data pad containing the day's reports. "Captain, how are the integration proceedings progressing?" Thompson consulted his pad. "Better than anyone projected. 73 former hegemony worlds have formally requested membership in the Human Cooperative. The coalition has restructured their entire government around human-style democratic principles. Even the Nexari Empire is implementing comprehensive judicial reforms." Admiral Wells nodded slowly. The galaxy was transforming, not through military conquest, but through the simple demonstration that there was a better way to organize civilized society. And the resistance movements? Largely collapsed, Thompson reported. "It's difficult to maintain support for the old ways when the alternative offers such clear benefits. Most beings, when given the choice between a system based on might makes right and one based on justice and equality, choose justice." Through the observation deck's transparent walls, they could see delegations from across the galaxy, working together on projects that would have been impossible under the old order. Former enemies shared technology and resources, building something greater than any single civilization could achieve alone. "Captain," Admiral Wells said quietly, "there's something I need to discuss with you. We've received a formal communication from the Outer Rim Confederacy. They're requesting intervention in a conflict with the Epsilon Sector Alliance." Thompson's expression grew serious. The Outer Rim was one of the few regions that had resisted human influence, maintaining their traditional approach to interstellar politics through force and intimidation. "What kind of conflict?" "The Alliance has been systematically enslaving Confederacy civilian populations for use in their industrial facilities. Approximately 2 million beings currently held in conditions that violate every principle of sentient rights." Admiral Wells pulled up a holographic display showing the disputed region. Red indicators marked locations where Alliance forces had established what they euphemistically called labor optimization centers. The Alliance leadership, claims that their actions are legal under traditional conquest protocols. They argue that superior military force gives them the right to utilize captured populations as they see fit. Thompson studied the display, noting the positions of various fleets and the locations of civilian populations caught between opposing forces. Admiral, this presents us with a choice. We could continue to focus on our local region and allow the Outer Rim to resolve this conflict using traditional methods, or we could extend human principles of justice to protect beings who have never heard of Earth. Admiral Wells smiled, recognizing the same moral clarity that had driven humanity to challenge the established galactic order in the first place. Captain, what do you think humanity should do? I think, Thompson said slowly, that justice is not a concept limited by geography or species loyalty. If we truly believe that all sentient beings deserve protection from those who would harm them, then we have an obligation to act, even though it means extending our operations far beyond human space. Even though it will require resources we could use to improve our own colonies. Thompson's expression grew resolute. Admiral, 2 years ago we made a decision that changed the course of galactic history. We decided that might does not make right, that superior technology does not give anyone the authority to murder innocents. Those principles don't become less important when the victims are strangers. Admiral Wells felt a familiar surge of pride in her species. In a galaxy full of civilizations that had existed for millennia, humans had somehow managed to remember what others had forgotten, that moral courage was more important than tactical advantage. Very well, Captain. Begin Operation Extended Justice. I want stealth vessels positioned throughout the Epsilon sector within the next 72 hours. Full surveillance on all Alliance military installations and documentation of conditions in their labor camps. As Thompson left to coordinate the operation, Admiral Wells remained on the observation deck, watching the bustling activity below. Representatives from the former hegemony worked alongside coalition diplomats and Nixari scientists, all focused on building institutions that would prevent future atrocities. Judge Amanda Foster approached, her expression carrying the satisfaction of someone who had spent the day ensuring that justice was served. Admiral, the last of the hegemony trials concluded today. General Vax was sentenced to temporal justice for his role in planning civilian massacres. That brings our total to 147 convictions for crimes against sentience. And the rehabilitation programs, exceeding all expectations, Foster replied. 70% of convicted officials who have completed their sentences are now working actively to reform their home governments. They've become some of our most effective advocates for justice and accountability. The judge paused, consulting her own datapad. We've also received requests from 12 different civilizations asking us to help them establish their own war crimes tribunals. The concept of holding leaders accountable for their actions is spreading faster than our most optimistic projections suggested. Admiral Wells felt a deep sense of satisfaction. Humanity had not conquered the galaxy through superior firepower or technological dominance. They had conquered it through the simple demonstration that there was a better way to live. Judge, there's something I want you to consider. We're expanding operations to the Outer Rim to address systematic slavery in the Epsilon sector. This will require establishing new courts and training additional judicial officers. Foster's eyes lit up with professional interest. Admiral, are you asking me to help design a justice system that can operate across the entire galaxy? I'm asking you to help us ensure that no sentient being, anywhere in the galaxy, has to live in fear of those more powerful than themselves. The judge smiled, and Admiral Wells saw the same moral fire that had driven humanity's transformation of galactic civilization. Admiral, I can think of no better use of my remaining years. As the conversation continued, Ambassador Cross joined them on the observation deck. The same human who had first challenged the Galactic Council now served as humanity's representative to a transformed galaxy. Admiral, Judge Foster, I wanted to share some interesting intelligence from our monitoring stations. The Galactic Council has voted to formally dissolve itself and transfer all governing authority to the new Interspecies Justice Coalition. Admiral Wells raised an eyebrow. The same council that dismissed us as primitive just 2 years ago. The very same. Apparently, watching civilization after civilization voluntarily adopt human-style justice systems has convinced them that the old ways of governing are obsolete. Cross activated a holographic display showing voting patterns from across the galaxy. The results were overwhelming. Species after species choosing justice over might. Cooperation over conquest, Admiral, he continued. They've also formally requested that humanity assume leadership of galactic governance. Not through conquest or intimidation, but through moral authority. Admiral Wells considered the implications. Leading the galaxy would mean accepting responsibility for the welfare of trillions of beings across thousands of worlds. It would mean ensuring that justice reached every corner of known space. It would also mean that humanity's long journey, from a small planet on the galactic rim to the moral center of civilization, was complete. Gentlemen, she said finally, I think it's time we accepted that responsibility. As the three humans stood together, watching the sunset paint New Geneva Station in shades of gold and crimson, they could see the future stretching out before them. A galaxy where justice protected the innocent, where moral law superseded military might, and where every species could contribute to something greater than any of them could achieve alone. The age of casual violence and systematic oppression was over. In its place, humanity had built something that would endure for millennia. A civilization based not on fear, but on the simple recognition that every sentient being deserved dignity, respect, and protection from those who would do them harm. The galaxy had learned, perhaps too late for some, that humanity never forgives those who harm innocence. But they had also learned something equally important. Humanity never stops believing in the possibility of redemption for those willing to change. It was a lesson that would echo through the stars for generations to come, ensuring that justice would always find a way to prevail over those who sought to profit from the suffering of others. The transformation was complete. The galaxy had become what humanity had always known it could be, a place where moral courage mattered more than raw power, and where the weak were protected by those strong enough to stand up for what was right. And in the end, that made all the difference.